I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska, as well as the offices in Sydney, Australia. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on September 12th, 2017. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during this live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window there on our live page. Log into that bottom left-hand corner. Just click in Log In. Choose the guest account. You don't have to create an account. Just use the guest one. Put your name in where it says guest. Take those numbers out. And join us in the live chat room anytime. We will be taking your questions live. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, we do that as well. Contact us. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strength Center. Just GallupStrengthCenter.com. Actually, some new updates coming to the Gallup Strength Center this month. You might want to join us there. GallupStrengthCenter.com for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs. And you can also catch the video and now downloadable audio. For offline listening, we call that podcasting. You can join it. Get all that information on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Ann Lingenfelter is our host today. She works as a learning solutions consultant with Gallup. They're in our Sydney, Australia office. And Ann, I wish I was there. You know, I say that every time. But welcome to another Call to Coach.
Thank you, Jim. It's always nice to be here. I'm headed your way in January, so this time I'm going to get to experience Omaha winter. So I'm sure it'll be a little different from the July summit, hot and humid weather that we had then. But I am still looking forward to it, regardless of the conditions. My guest tonight, depending on where you are, is Kate Cawthorn. Kate is a Gallup certified coach. She's based here in Sydney. She's the co-founder and managing director of the Speakers Institute. And she is a professional speaker. So she travels all over Australia and internationally and speaks. And she, at the Speakers Institute, she teaches other people how to do the same thing. So she and her husband, Sam, worked together to build up this business, and they brought strengths in as part of that. She's coached many people within organizations and one-on-one around their strengths. And she uses it in her family as well. So Kate, welcome to Call to Coach. So please, you could join us today.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Jim. I'm really honored to be here.
Kate's top 5 are empathy, harmony, adaptability, developer, and intellection. And Kate, when I think about you, I always remember when I first met you. And Kate and I were in the accelerated strengths coaching course together at the same time, like 3 years ago or more. And like Kate, I have empathy, number one. But those of us who've been around strengths for a long time really start to understand that strengths are really about, when we think about strengths, what it tells us is that we are enough. Whatever our strengths are, it's enough, right? We don't have to feel like we're these broken people who have to, identify what's not working and fix that. What we can do is identify what's really fantastic and sort of replicate that and amplify that. And I remember being in the room with you, and I remember you trying to come to terms with empathy and the value of empathy, right? And the thing that was so interesting about that, and you can tell this in your own words, but I remember the entire cohort in that class feeling at the end that the strongest, most powerful strength in the room was Kate's empathy, because honestly, because the ability that you had to develop trusting relationships, and you were just a phenomenal coach. Just naturally and intuitively. So I can imagine how that must play out for you in your business. But when you think back to those few years ago and you cast your mind back to coming to terms with, your top 5 and what they meant for you, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I guess for me, being in a room with such an amazing group of people and hearing about all of their businesses they already had running and everything that they were doing with coaching already, and coming in and learning that they had strengths that I envied, like focus and discipline and strategic and all these things that really help them put a well-structured coaching business together. So I was looking at empathy and harmony and adaptability, and I'm thinking, these are all the soft, mushy ones that how do I use this? And I couldn't say, it was a real blind spot for me to be able to see the value in that. I'd always seen it play out in my life, but before I'd come into the coaching space, I hadn't been able to see its value. So to hear that and to hear you say that as well and remind me about that, it's really beautiful. And I do get reminded of it a lot. So yeah, but I really, really loved the growth in that week during the accelerated coaching course that we did together. And yeah, it's just gone on from there. So it was just extraordinary.
Yeah, I felt the same. So let's take a step back and talk to us a little bit about the Speaker Institute, what you do there, and I know there was a name change, right? It was something else prior to that, but tell me a bit about how you started it and where it is today.
Yeah, sure. So the business has been around. What we do here at Speakers Institute, which was previously the Institute for Professional Speakers, so just a small abbreviation of the name. We developed the business because my husband Sam was a motivational speaker. He had a car accident just almost 11 years ago where he lost his arm and his right leg was permanently disabled. So he had started out as a motivational speaker and traveled the world all the time with that and helping people to focus on resilience and what he calls bouncing forward rather than bouncing back. So he was able to touch a lot of his lives that way, but he really felt impacted to be able to make more of a difference in the world. He has significance in his top 5 as well. To make more of a difference in the world with regard to empowering other people to get their message out. So he started to step back from the stage and instead empower others to get on the stage to share what it is that they have on their lives. And so the Speakers Institute was born. So what we do here is to train people how to, first of all, unpack the message that they might have within them and then give them the tools and the skills that they need to be able to get that message out onto the world, whether it is on the platform, so on the stage, or through podcasts or books or whatever else that they might be wanting to do. So we're really giving them all the tips and tricks and tools that they need to be able to get themselves out in that space.
So it's interesting that you because I know the business is growing. You've told me that you're hiring lots of new people and you're doing all sorts of interesting work, developing online components to your website and platform. So it's interesting to see how the audience out there, the world out there in Sydney, Australia is embracing what you guys do. What is it that you think is driving the everyday person to really want to get out there and tell people their story?
I think the world has changed a lot from the way that it used to be. So we used to have people that would look at, say, professional speakers or celebrities or anybody that was on TV or on the radio, and they'd think, well, wow, that's great, and what an amazing person they are. And a small minority of people would think, oh, that's what I want to do, and they'd really have the drive to get out and do that. But I think that now with social media and Facebook Live and all the different mediums that there are for people to be able to share their story, and everywhere, Instagram stories, Facebook stories, everyone now has their own platform. And there's an increasing number of people who are wanting to be able to make a difference with that. So now people are looking as well at, what have I got that I can share? I need to share something. I should be sharing something. How can I make a difference? So a lot of people are coming to us to get the help that they need to really discover what it is within themselves that they are able to bring out to the world. So, and that's where Strengths has come in a lot to help them unpack that and how they've discovered what their natural gifts and talents are, and then put that together with what their own story on earth is. And it's become really impactful.
Yeah, that was my next question, is specifically, how do you see the people that you're working with use Strengths? How do you introduce them to it, and how are you then sort of taking it the next few steps with them?
Yeah, so I might just step back a bit and talk about how we got into Strengths ourselves. So because it really flows on from there. So one day, years and years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, my husband Sam was sitting in a cafe just by himself, just minding his own business, which is rare for him. He's normally surrounded by people, but was just wanting to have some time out. And a guy spotted him from across the cafe and stood up, stranger, a complete stranger, and walked across to him, and he said, "Excuse me, you don't know me, but there's this book I really want you to read." And he put Discover Your Strengths on the table. And he said, "Now you can just take it with you. There's a code in the back. You just rip it apart and go online and do the assessment." And then he walked away. And so,
did he work for Gallup?
No, he didn't. And he walked away, and Sam's like, "What is this?" So he took the book home and he ripped the code out and he did the assessment. And he was so impacted by discovering what his strengths were that he then told me about it, bought me a book with a code, and we ended up buying around 400 books. So we'd carry them around everywhere, and we always had books with us that we'd hand out to people to try and, you know, spread the message further. So it's a lot easier now that we've got codes. They're easier to carry around. But so then from that point, we started to every single person that we came into contact with, we started telling them about strengths, getting them to do the assessment. We've got every single contact that we have in our phones, we've saved their strengths under their name. So whenever they call us, it comes up with their name and their top 5. So we know how to talk to that person. We know what their language is. So when we started our business and we started having clients coming in to wanting to discover what their message is, that was the first thing that people do when they've registered for one of our programs. They get sent a code. They have to do their strengths. So every single person that's come through the Speakers Institute has discovered their top 5. And then we've had coaches, before I was certified, we had other coaches come and deliver a facilitation session on understanding strengths, what that means. And then as they progress through our program, then I'm facilitating more in-depth sessions to unpack what they do with it, all about everything that they need to know about their strengths. So it's a real journey from the beginning of when they walk in the door to when they leave. So they've had a huge understanding of what they can do with that.
It's amazing. It's driving me crazy. I want to know who that guy was. Did you ever find out who it was?
His name is George Harris. We did bump into him again, and he became a very good friend of ours. So yes, he's an amazing man.
So what, I mean, did he know Sam? Because Sam has some level of notoriety here in Australia, right? Yeah. He was a young Australian of the year, and he's sort of known in the public eye. So did he just recognize him in the cafe and think it was a message that should be gotten out?
Yeah, so a couple of things. At that point, we were living in Tasmania, which is the smallest state of Australia, and everybody kind of knows everybody. So, and because of Sam's accident and what he had gone through, he had been on the news, he'd been all through the newspapers and all of that sort of thing. And he's a very distinctive looking person anyway. But then when you see him with a bionic arm that's like silver, and you can't miss him. So, yeah, he was probably recognised, and and George thought it would have been a good idea for him to get on the strengths bandwagon. So, which it was.
So why is it an important part of a successful speaker's life to understand their strengths? Why does it matter?
Yeah, so this is something that I was just talking about. We just had an event on the weekend. We've got people that were about 3/4 of the way through our 12-month program at the moment. And I was going over this with them because I feel like I'm always kind of trying to jam it down their throats and talk about strengths with them every single time they come in. So I was really talking about especially when you're putting your message out into the world and making sure that what you are trying to say to people really lands with an impact. The best way for you to be congruent and to come across as honest and even vulnerable with your message is to come from the heart. And I believe that the only way you can truly come from the heart is to connect with who you are as an individual before you can get that out and to anybody else and connect with them on the same level. So understanding why you do things the way you do, the things that make you feel, think, and behave the way that you do, really is to do that. And I don't think that there's any other thing in the world that can help you to connect with yourself and your message more so than understanding what your strengths are. So it's vitally important with everything that we do.
Yeah, interesting. So not too long after you got Gallup certified, Sam came along to one of our alumni events. I don't know if you remember this, here in Sydney, and he addressed our alumni, our certified coaches. A lot of them, trying to start their own businesses, maybe transitioning out of corporate life into their own, sort of coaching business, consulting business. And Sam talked about the message he delivered that night in hopes of helping them be successful in those endeavors was to think about why me and why now. And I think that was a really powerful, two powerful questions. And can you speak a little bit about the ideas behind that so that our broader coaching community outside of Australia can benefit from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's three questions, actually. It's why this, why me, and why now. So that's what we use with what we call the elevator pitch. So when somebody's coming into, somebody says, what do you do? Or where do you work? What do you do? And then you've got your pitch, which you can then deliver. And it answers those three questions. So why this is all about, what is it that you do? What product or service do you have that can address the pain points or problems of your target audience? So what is it? What is this thing that you deliver for people? Why me is all about blowing your own trumpet, basically. So why are you the person that needs to deliver this product or service? What have you been able to achieve in your life or in your career and in your business that will make you the person that they need to come to get this product or service? And why now is what is the urgency? Why does this thing have to be done right now? And why can't they just put it off and wait or see if they can find somebody else to do that? So it's all about, the world is changing rapidly, all that type of thing. And what you need, I've got for you right now because I've done this. So why this, why me, and why now?
Yeah,
that's
I
what
love
we
that.
teach.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think that speaks to the shift that's happened within your organization, the Speakers Institute, over the time that I've known you. So it's not just about teaching people to stand up on a stage and deliver a powerful message. It's really shifted now into more of broadened into a professional and personal development organization, right? So really looking at more than just standing on a stage and delivering a powerful message. Can you talk a little bit about why your business has changed the way that it has, and what you do now that you didn't do before?
At the beginning, people were hearing our names, Speakers or Institute for Professional Speakers, and some people were kind of thinking, well, I'm not a professional speaker, nor do I want to be. I'm not the kind of person that wants to get up on stage and be a motivational speaker. I'm more of a teacher or trainer. I'm a facilitator, or I just even want to get better at presenting something in the boardroom at work, all of those sorts of things. So we had such a diverse range of people coming along to our programs just to even find out what it was all about. And we've had in the last couple of years a real surge of people that are just wanting to connect with themselves on a deeper level and develop themselves professionally and personally. So they've been coming in to learn things like confidence and having charisma and certainty on stage or just within themselves. And so being able to come through the program, discover who they are as a person, as well as grow in their confidence and their certainty and things like that at the same time, has really helped to drive, I guess, that surge of people wanting to learn more about their personal and professional development, which has really been interesting to watch and really exciting to be a part of as well, when we can see people's lives being impacted and changed by the fact that they've grown in themselves. And then that gives them almost the permission to be able to go out there in the world and really make the difference that they can.
Yeah. Can you give us some specific stories? Tell us some examples about people you've worked with that have really, had amazing things happen when they started using strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a couple of little stories that I absolutely love. So one of them is I've had a client that came through our boot camp. We call it our 3-day premiere event that people come to, and she's a psychologist, and she has done a lot and all those sorts of things about finding out how people tick and what it is that makes them who they are. Obviously, being a psychologist, but loves strengths they, because doing it when she came through our program, she went and started getting all of her clients to do it. So she had a client who was a young guy who was just tragically having suicidal thoughts, and he was coming along to her to try and work through all of that sort of thing. So the next time that I spoke to her, she was just over the moon, overjoyed, and came into the office and told me about this young guy who'd come in to see her after taking his strengths assessment. And he'd said that so long he'd thought that his life was worthless, that he had nothing to offer people. And so when he got just his top 5 results back, just those 5 words that said, this is who you are and this is how you can make a difference in the world, it just turned everything around for him, just knowing that he had something that he can take into the world and that gives him meaning and gives him purpose for his life. So that actually helped us save his life. And it's, you know, that's my favorite story. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's not much that can top that. But I do have 2 other stories.
Please share them.
So I've got, I went into a large organization that deals with a lot of multi-level marketing, all that sort of thing, and spoke to their headquarters. And I was told by the manager that they wanted their teams to do their strengths so that they could work more productively together as a team. So I went in and I said to the manager first, talk to me about the team, help me understand who they are, and does anybody in particular have any sort of areas that you would like to work on through this session? And the CEO said to me, yeah, look, there's a lady who I'm really not sure if she's working out with us. She's really unhappy all the time. She's just always got a frown on her face and snapping at everyone, and we're thinking we're going to let her go. So, you know, after this session, we'll see how it all works, but basically we think we're at the end of the road for her. And so we went in, we did the session, and everybody discovered their top 5. And this lady had been working for this company for 17 years, and she knew everything about the organization. And there was quite, the rest of the staff were a lot younger, so coming in new and not really having much of an idea of the job or the role that they were doing. So they were always coming to this lady and asking her for advice or training and how that she can help them in their new job and all of that sort of thing. And it was really, really getting to her. When I looked at her top 5, she's number 1 deliberative and analytical, and I'm like, oh my goodness, the poor thing. And she's not somebody that wants to be having conversations with all these people all the time and constantly interrupted and being taken off her task and wanting to not. She just wanted to get on with her job and really do what it was that she was there to do. So after discovering all of that and having conversations with both her and then her managers afterwards, I made a suggestion that she be promoted and taken upstairs and given an office of her own and develop a training manual for these young people, but not on the floor where she was constantly interrupted by everybody, because that's why she's angry and agitated and always got a frown on her face, is because she just wants to do her job and do it well. So then I went back for a follow-up session 3 months later, and I saw this lady had been promoted. She had an office upstairs of her own and was so much happier. And she came down and gave me a big hug as soon as I walked in the door to thank me for saving her job. But it was just fantastic to be able to see the difference that can be made just by understanding people a little better. So yeah, it's another one of my favorite stories, that one.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really good. Yeah, she should give you a hug. You also got her promoted.
Yeah.
And is there one more that you have already in your mind? Go ahead and share it if so.
Yeah, there is. And this one comes right back to, or it started just after I did my training there in the Gallup office with you guys. And it was after doing the training that I discovered the whole concept of balconies and basements. And I remember while we were training, I had my name tag there on the table with my top 5 strengths. And I'd also written on a Post-it note my husband's top 5 strengths and put them beside at the same time. So throughout the whole week, I was looking at that and I'm like, oh my goodness. And really having an understanding of that every argument that we have is because one of us is in our basement of something. And so it was a real realization for me. And I didn't figure that out for probably 2 weeks after the training. It was just this anxiety that was hanging over me, and I was like, what is that? What is that? And then I figured it out. And it was fortunately a day that Sam was about to fly out somewhere, and we were on our way to a parent-teacher interview for our daughter's school. And I was driving the car, and I said, look, there's something I need to talk to you about, but I think I'm going to write you an email. He said, I'm not getting on a plane until you tell me what it is, because if you say we need to talk and you're going to put it in an email, I need to know about it now. So I then explained to him, and I had to be very careful about explaining the concept of balconies and basements, whereas I wasn't going to be pointing the finger at him and saying, you know, when you do this, that's because of this. And so instead what I did is I pointed out all of my own balconies and basements in that conversation. And he had his own aha moment at the same time when he realized, reflecting on himself, what his own were. And so then he started apologizing for things that he does, and because he got the same realization at the same time. And it was such a relief for both of us to be able to understand what it is about the arguments and disagreements that we have and why that is. And so now we know what we can do about it. It's so much simpler. And so on that, now this third story is the relationships that we've been able to restore after we've put couples together. So I've had people coming through our programs here and discovering their strengths, and I've talked to them about balconies and basements, and I've shared a little bit about that story with Sam and I with them as well. Always have to be careful because we're always both in the room and they're all our clients, so we can't go too deep into the relationship side of things. But so I've had people come up to me afterwards and say, I really want you to sit down with my husband or with my wife and I and go through this. And so I do have a bit of fun with it because I love obviously relying on empathy a lot as well when they walk in the room, but putting their strengths side by side and looking at how they interact together. And so they come in, they sit down, I put their strengths side by side, and I said, look, if you'll just indulge me for a minute, I'd like to be able to see if I can tell you where you guys fight, where your arguments are, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. And they go, okay, fine, and they laugh about it. And so then when I do that, just going on balconies and basements of what I know about their strengths, they are always dumbfounded and saying, have you got secret cameras in our house? Like, how do you know this? So, yeah, I have seen marriages restored by strengths. I've seen relationships come back together, and people having a deeper understanding and appreciation for their husbands or wives or partners. And so that's another thing that makes my heart sing every single time. Just seeing that people can deepen their relationships and their connections with one another just by understanding who they are and how they work.
Yeah, I love that.
That's one of my favorites.
No, that's a really great one. And I love how you, how you've proven it's like, proof of concept before you even get started, just in being able to identify from their top 5. So I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
So I can see in those stories that you've already told, I can see your empathy, I can see your harmony, I can see your developer even. Tell me a bit about your adaptability and your intellection. Tell me where those come into play in the success of your business and in your personal life as well.
Yep. So I'll start with intellection because that comes into play a lot within our business. So for me, I guess it comes into play whenever I walk out of here. So I've got people here all the time, all around me, coming into my office and asking me questions or needing advice and all those sorts of things, or just coming to sit down on I've got a chair here in the corner where people are often just sitting because they just want to be here. So I've got people around me all the time. And then when I leave here, I very rarely listen to music. I very rarely watch TV or any of those sorts of things because I just need my own headspace. I just need quiet to think and process everything. And a lot of the time when I'm in that space, I feel that intellection's there, just sort of helping me to process all the things that have happened during the day. And that's when I come up with a lot of ideas as well, which is quite unfortunate because I'm often just wandering around thinking about things when I've not got a pen or paper, or I've not got anywhere to write down notes. And so then putting on our online programs, which I design and write a lot of that sort of thing. I find that in that time when I've got that space for my intellection to work is when I come up with a lot of the ideas for work. So it kind of is a bit of a two-edged sword sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, and adaptability, I think for me is mostly on the personal sense. And the very, very first time I really saw that coming into play, and this is before I'd even taken the assessment and knew that it was there, was straight after Sam had his accident. He, as I said earlier, had a car accident almost 11 years ago. And I got a phone call from the police and had to go to the hospital and sort out everything there with the children and the family and all of that sort of thing. And something just clicked inside me and made me just completely calm in all of that chaos. And I didn't know what it was, but I could make phone calls to everybody. I could sort out the kids. I could have people come and drive me places. I could talk to the doctors and nurses and understand exactly what was going on and just be completely calm in all of that. And to the point where people thought that I had some kind of problem. Like, why wasn't I stressed out? What was wrong with me that I could be there? Didn't I, they thought that I was just not caring, or what was it that I was just so calm? And I couldn't tell them what it was until afterwards I did my assessment and I read about adaptability, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense now. So, and that happens a lot, especially here when we've got events running, and often something will go wrong at the very last minute, as it always does when you've got a lot of people in the room and a lot of strong personalities. So if something happens, I'm the first one that gets called on when it's turned to chaos, and I'm like, okay, well, that's all right. This is what we're going to do. And so adaptability really comes into play a lot there as well.
I see Jim Collison nodding and smiling. Jim, you have adaptability high, don't you?
I do. Yeah, it's a 6 or 7 for me. And I have a son who has a number 1. And
I
didn't quite understand it fully. And I actually mistook it for laziness in some ways, because we would ask him, well, what do you want to do? I can do anything. And he just didn't necessarily when he was young. And I don't know if you saw this or if you were this way when you were younger, but he didn't always have an opinion. It was like, hey, I can go either way. And until I spotted that in his assessment, we had him take StrengthsFinder at, I think he was 17, maybe, when we had him take it. And we got that adaptability number 1 back, and I was like, oh, so you were talking about those basements, and it was maybe even a misconceived basement for me in the way I saw that in him as a parent. Thinking that adaptability was just laziness, because and so I fought it hard, and until I realized that our relationship was very, very strained. Once I realized it, and we knew its adaptability was there, then we kind of cut him some slack. It's like, oh, this kid can do anything. So I did. When you were younger, did you experience anything similar, or did you have any because sometimes let me just throw that question to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I didn't know what it was, but I could not make a decision. I'm lucky that my family was small, so it was just my mum, dad, my brother, and I. And so we'd have a family meeting. There's only 4 of us, and if there was ever a decision to be made, it was, okay, guys, what do we want to do? And I'm like, I don't mind. I'm easy. That's just whatever you guys say, I'll go along with it. So, but then we did, when I was around 15, I think, we had some problems within our family, and mum and dad took us all to family counselling. And I was just so unfazed by everything that the counsellor took me aside and sat me in a room, and he's like, why aren't you feeling stronger about all of this stuff that's going on? And because I know it'll be okay. I'm all right. Like, I didn't know how to put it into words, but I just did not feel stressed out. I just felt like this is all okay, and it'll blow over, and which it did. And so he was then giving us all animal names. He was a really interesting counselor, but he gave us all animal names, and mine was the owl. So I'm just sort of sitting there and observing and overlooking everything and remaining calm. So yeah, that's how I guess that's my spirit animal.
But you also have this empathy what was the other one that you have in your top 5?
Harmony.
Harmony
And developer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you probably even could sense some of that going on around you, and kind of you knew, okay, this has maybe happened before. We've pulled through it. This is going to be, you could feel if it was going to be really bad or what was going on there. You could kind of sense that. And so using that superpower in there, I just find it interesting. Then now you're kind of taking this to these roles, to the work that you're doing with other people. Do you find, how do you superimpose that? Or how do you mentioned one where, when things go crazy in a room, you're able to kind of work within that. How else are you taking that, helping other people, especially in this area of speaking? Because a lot of people are scared to death of speaking, right? So how are you doing that?
So I use empathy a lot in that regard. So I walk into the room here and I can feel it all. I can feel the tension and some of the anger and the frustration and the nervousness and everything. And I generally know who's the catalyst. So there's generally one person in the room who's everybody else is feeding off because they're the most stressed out. So I'll make a beeline for that person, grab them and pull them into my office. And I say, okay, you need to calm down. And they're just looking at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, you know what I mean. And we just need to sit down, breathe. Everything's going to be okay. And they generally burst into tears, and then they tell me everything about what's going on, and so then once that person's put back together, we go back out, and everything seems to have been smoothed over. So I use that a lot in here, and also knowing when to. Sometimes people have to be removed because they're the thing going on, and I never really know what it is, and that's always confronting if I have to do that. But I get a feeling in the pit of my stomach sometimes and have to deal with it. So and sometimes that's just, again, a conversation in here and tell me what's going on for you right now, or so it does come into play a lot.
That's interesting when we think about balconies and basements, and you have empathy as number one. So many people with empathy, number one, will say they struggle to have difficult conversations that they know are going to, hurt the other person. It sounds like you've figured that one out, and that you're able to still have those tricky conversations. How are you doing that?
That's when I have to put empathy and harmony together. So I've got to look at the balance of everybody else and how is this going to affect them. It's got to be equal for everybody, and it's got to be fair and right. So, and there's not going to be any tension left in the room afterwards, or else it's not going to be right for everybody. So I've had to spend a lot of time learning to reframe what I've got in order to emulate other things. So I have to think, how is this situation going to be affected if I don't remove this person? How is everybody else in the room going to feel if this situation is not corrected? So that's when I've got to really change the way I'm looking and shift the lens of how I'm looking at something. And then I've got to deal with it that way, because I know that if I don't, then it's going to be detrimental for everybody, and that's not going to feel good for anybody. So I have to look at it that way. And I've spent a lot of time working on that.
That's excellent. I love the language you used around that, the reframing, the emulating, because that's really crossing into the aiming it bit, isn't it? So I think an awful lot of folks get hung up on the first stage of just discovering their strengths and naming them, and even maybe claiming them. But when it sounds like you've figured out over a lot of practice about how you need to aim it in order to have success, and that's a really lovely way that you've put it. Do you have any other sort of tips like that you've learned in the workplace or in the family? Yeah,
so I've as I said, spend a lot of time doing this within myself, but I do love to set challenges for myself and helping other people reframe anything into something else that they want. So it's a lot of fun, and sometimes it is scary if I think, what if someone throws up some strength that they want to emulate and I can't think of a way to do it, but I generally do. So what I love to do in our facilitation sessions is the Love-Crazed Emv Exercise. And so I get everyone to talk about what they love, what drives them or others crazy. And then when it comes to the envy piece, I talk to them about for example, with discipline and focus being really, really far down in my list of strengths. And how do I make that work? Because I need to be disciplined and I need to have focus. I'm running a company and I've got employees and all those sorts of things. So I've had to teach them all about how I reframe my strengths. But then I ask them what is one strength or one theme that they wish that they had in their top 5 and why. Explain why. And so then they explain, you know, oh, I really need focus too. I wish I had adaptability. So then we talk about what they've got in their top 5 or in their dominant themes for those that they've unpacked their full reports. To really emulate what it is that they're missing, that they feel they're missing, and that they can then make it work for them. Sometimes it's a pairing that they need to look at that's within their top 5, or other times it's just really reframing one of their strengths and looking at it in a different light. So I love being able to help people see things differently in that way, and just get a real deeper understanding of how their strengths work for them and how they can, and how they're underutilizing them sometimes. So that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, fantastic. I know you were at the summit in July. Kate, tell me about that. How was that experience for you?
Too short. It was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. It was long flights, 3 flights to get there and 3 flights to get home. It took me 24 hours each way. But I absolutely loved every second. I just wish it was longer, because my woo talents take a few days to unearth themselves. So I loved listening and absorbing and watching everybody, but it just, it's difficult for me to get in there and join a conversation. So a few more days would be great.
Well, hold on, Kate. Before you go too far, let me just say, there's nothing stopping people from getting to Omaha on Saturday. And the summit strategy, because we get that feedback a lot on the summits.
Yep.
And we had some Australian folks show up on Saturday last year, and you can do Saturday, Sunday, and we did a lot of informal meetups. So let me just throw that out there, that if you want to come into town early, we're trying to organize some things. They won't be officially a part of the summit, but there's some great opportunities to network if you come in the weekend before, and there's plenty of time, and there's a lot of great stuff downtown. So I will throw that out.
Okay.
Yeah,
right,
excellent.
Something to keep in mind.
That's really good.
Yes. So the summit.
Yes. So tell me more about the summit, and as far as what was your favorite moment or your best learning, I should say, if you can distill it down to one.
Wow. There were so many. I absolutely loved listening to Tom Rath in the main auditorium. But my absolute favorite, where I got a bit geeked out, is listening to Jim Harder talking about the history of CliftonStrengths. So I always get asked the question, tell me more about how strength started, tell me more about the history, all that sort of thing. So, when I saw that session come up, I thought, oh my goodness, I have to be there. When I was in that session, and this was one of many actually, that I was there with my phone and taking photos of the screen and trying to get everything, until some lady beside me nudged me and said, you know, you can download all of that stuff from the app. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm writing notes. But just, listening to all of those stories about how Jim actually worked with Don Clifton and I spent the time with him and talking about the duffel bag full of cards that he then built into the very first database. And I was just so impacted by that session, to almost embarrassingly, to the point where I came back home, and a few days after I got home, I'd had to facilitate a session about strengths. And so I'd inserted that new information that I had about the history of strengths into my presentation. And one of the slides that I used was the timeline of how many people have taken StrengthsFinder, and how Don Clifton's dream was that 1 million people would take the StrengthsFinder assessment. And so it wasn't until I was actually on stage delivering this presentation that I realized around the time that he passed away was when that 1 million mark was reached. And so I was there on stage and I said, oh my goodness, look at that. And the year that he passed away, and I almost burst into tears. I was so close, and my voice caught in my throat, and I was like, okay, isn't that amazing? And nobody else was quite as impacted as I was. But so that was my geek girl moment. But one of the most amazing things that I took away from the summit was that learning, and just really hearing about where it all began.
Yeah. I do understand that. I had an experience where Jim Collison walked me through the early childhood learning sort of think tank research lab that Mary Reckmeyer runs there, and established, and I felt the same thing, looking at these little kids who, before they can read, they're already having their patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior, identified, and people in their lives talking to them about it. And I think that whole idea that how that will impact them growing up is really phenomenal. So it is pretty great work that we get to do. As far as timing goes for our show today, I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to make sure that that we get everything mentioned that you want to talk about, Kate. So is there anything in particular that I haven't asked you about that you want to mention? I've got a couple of things that I still kind of have up my sleeve I'd like to ask you, but just making sure that you, is there anything I've missed yet?
I did write down on my little list here, almost a shout out, I guess, to one particular coach in India that was the catalyst for me to become a coach with Gallup. And so I'll do that. So I, as I said, we've used strengths for a long time within our business. And in the beginning, before I became certified, we had a lot of different coaches come through and run our facilitation sessions for us. And so each time that we had somebody new come in and talk about strengths, I got a new angle and just a new sort of little insight into this whole movement and what it is. And so each little part that I got from each coach was helping to develop the desire in me to be certified and to learn more about it. But then we sometimes run our boot camp programs in India as well. So we had flown over there with our team, and I then thought, okay, we need a coach. So I went onto the certified coaches directory on the Gallup site, and I found this guy's name. He's Manish Puri. He's been on Call to Coach before, and we're really good friends on Facebook, and we did catch up at the summit as well. But he came and facilitated a session for us at our boot camp there in India. And it was when he was up there and delivering this session with so much energy and passion and excitement, the way that he does, that I was at the back of the room on my phone, and I'm on the Gallup website and thinking, okay, how do I do this? I'm going to register. I'm going to become a coach. So that was literally while he was on stage. So that's a big thank you to him to helping me be where I am now.
Yeah,
that's
fantastic.
The only other thing.
Yeah, I do love our coaching community. It's amazing how much the coaching community gives away, and I know they often say that they get back from the same community. The sharing resources tab on the closed Call to Coach Facebook group is phenomenal. I mean, the amount of sharing and that is there, and that abundance mentality. So thank you for that. Couple of things that I'll point out that you've touched on today that I thought was really brilliant. I love how you have the top 5 on people's on the phone underneath their name when it comes up on the screen. I think that's really, really good. I had not heard that one. And then even the balconies and basement conversation to start off the sort of couples, coaching session, the different ones on the Post-it notes. I think that is also a takeaway for me. One of the things that caught my eye on your website was, what was it called? The difference between storytelling versus story showing. And I know that's not necessarily about strengths, but I'd like to hear a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So that's a new book that Sam's got coming out in a few weeks. It comes out in the beginning of October. And so what that's about is how for years we've been taught that storytelling is the way to get our message out, but we're disrupting that with story showing. So one of Sam's, one of the things that he is brilliant at is stagecraft and using the stage to tell a story with body language and all of those sorts of things. So for him, it's about really being a part of a story and being able to show that story to somebody more than just tell it, so that you're able to then have that person become a part of that story as well, so that they can really feel it. So that's something that we're beginning to teach people here at Speakers Institute as well, is how to really show your story to the point where people will be even more impacted by it. So yeah, that's his new book that's coming out, the free plug in October.
Well, I didn't even know that. So that was a
Yeah.
good transition in there for that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now I've seen that idea, that concept of story showing in action. There's a not-for-profit here in Australia that brings students, refugee students who have come into Australia together, and they have them tell their story, share their story about what brought them to Australia. And it's always a really, difficult scenario that was playing out in their home country. Bring them here, they tell their story, and then everyone in the room then acts out each of their stories, and they do this on stage. And now the BBC has come along and they've made a film about it, and it's something that's being done, but it's really powerful. And also in that it helps people in a school environment understand who these people are and what it was that brought them here. And it can lead to that level of understanding and trust can then transform relationships. When we talk about some of the difficulties that happen in communities where you have a large refugee population that has come in, and then the folks who are there. So entirely separate scenario from what you're talking about, but I've seen the power that can have in the story showing element, and having other people involved in the acting out of one another's stories. So good luck with that work. That sounds brilliant. Yeah. Jim, any questions from your side before we go?
Just a couple comments. One, we've said the word balconies and basements quite a bit. We are finding in some cultures that doesn't make any sense. And so we've used helps and hinders. That's just another way of looking at it. So that's for folks in maybe in other languages, just kind of a reminder we're using those. We're kind of using that terminology. And then, Kate, I wanted to ask you any tips as we think of new coaches. We add, every month we add 100 new coaches kind of to the network.
Yeah.
You maybe have a unique perspective of being on the outside and then coming in, making that decision. You said that one day you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm sure you learn some things through the process. What kind of advice would you give to a new coach today?
Don't underestimate yourself. It's probably the main thing. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Everybody else is on their own journey and they have their own story that's unique to them. So don't look at what's coming alongside you or the other coaches that are already out there and that they've been doing it for a long time. First, they might look like they've got more or better experience than you, but don't underestimate what your own natural gifts can deliver to the world. It's the most powerful thing that you have to be able to develop these superpowers, which are your strengths, and that's what you've got to be able to give to somebody else. So really take the time to unpack and understand what you've got to be able to make sure that you can really deliver that impact for everybody else as well, and really spread this message as far and as wide as you possibly can.
Yeah,
that would be my one piece.
That's great advice. We tell people all the time, don't imitate, but certainly take the best that exists out there and incorporate that into your own. Be you, because we have these coaches teaching other people all the time, like, hey, be the best version of you, and then they're trying to be. They are themselves trying to be another coach, or they're trying to copy someone else's program, and there's nothing that I think makes people less effective sometimes than when they try to be somebody that they're not, or not themselves. And so I love that advice coming from you. Be original, Called the Coach was an original program that nobody was doing before. And we just said, we had this idea let's just do this thing. And then Kurt Liesfeld had this idea, let's do this Theme Thursday thing. Can you make it happen? And those didn't exist before. Those didn't exist before. And I think there's lots of great opportunities in what you guys are doing and what other coaches are doing to be able to do new and original things that aren't necessarily copies of just copying someone else's formula. By the way, we need that. We need a diverse coaching community, right? It needs to be
absolutely
diverse. We can't all be doing the same thing. So great. And let me throw it back over to you as we wrap it up.
Yeah, fantastic. I think really, Kate, if there's anything that you have as far as people that you follow or resources that you've really drawn on that you want to leave us with, is there any blogs that you follow, or you know what I mean? Are there any things that have really been other than strengths that have really been powerful for you in the work that you're doing? Anyone that you could suggest to us and to the community?
So I'm all through the Facebook group, the Call to Coach Facebook group, and I like and follow anybody that invites me on their pages, which are other fellow coaches, because not to compare, but to get insights into what other coaches are doing, other types of ways that they're coaching. So I'm always interested in that. I do a lot of reading of different types of books. One of our mentors, who I've also had the enormous honor to be able to coach and to unpack his strengths with him, is Michael Grenda, who's one of the founders of NLP and body language himself. So he's an amazing guy, and I've read a lot of his books as well, and he's been here to run some programs with us. So I'm all about just really coming alongside and learning from as many different types of people as I can. So yeah, I follow a lot of blogs and a lot of different resources, and not only Gallup coaches, but all other types of coaches as well, that are really in the space of helping to empower people and help people to understand how to have a bigger impact and how to be the best version of themselves as well. So basically, my piece of advice there is to just have your ears and eyes open always, and just be always learning and trying to find out whatever it is that helps you on your path and on your journey to become who you need to be.
Yeah, excellent. Sounds like great advice. I think we'll have to leave it at that as the last word, Jim.
All right, Kate, thank you. Thanks for joining us. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Kate mentioned a couple times our Facebook group. If you head out to the Facebook and just search Call to Coach, we keep the group closed just to keep the spammers out. So anyone can join us in that group if they'd like to. Search for Called, CALLED, to the letter TO and Coach, and ask to be invited, and I will probably be the one who will let you in. We'll also remind you, if you have questions or comments or like to be a guest blogger on our coaches blog, that coaches blog's at coaching.gallup.com. We are taking submissions for those, and we've been getting some great ones lately. Send us a fully formed blog, 400 to 600 words. Send that to coaching@gallup.com, put guest blogger in the subject line, and we will consider that. Don't forget, you can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones. We have 100 or 50 or more of these programs out there. They're all available on our coaches blog, and easy ways to find them out there as well, coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup Certified Strengths Coach, like Kate had talked about, you can also see a list of all our courses that are available and that lead to that certification. It's available on our courses page. Just go to courses.gallup.com. And if you have any questions, there's a contact form right there on the page. If you found this helpful, and I hope you did, we'd ask that you'd share it. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And with that, we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach, and we'll say goodbye, everybody.